I want to share with you some research on bad habits, addiction, finding peace from anxiety. Even if you don't struggle with addictions, we've all had stress in our lives, and I'm going to share with you one very simple, very powerful way to deal with addiction in 6 minutes. It's not a 6-minute video, but how to deal with addiction in 6 minutes. Hey everybody, Chad Cruiser here with Health and Homestead. One of the things my wife and I have been doing for probably more than a decade has been traveling around. We've been traveling around for almost 20 years presenting on different subjects, but one of the things we've been presenting on also is a seminar that we do called the Overcoming Seminar. And it's about overcoming bad habits in life, whatever they are, whether it's drug addiction, whether it's anxiety, whether it's any negative habit that you may have. And we're going to talk about one very powerful way to deal with that. Not the only way, but just one of the tools in your arsenal, one of the tools in your tool belt for finding victory over bad habits. And now the center of the battle for overcoming bad habits has got to be in the mind. It's in the brain. It's in the human brain. And the center of that battle in the brain is what researchers call the frontal lobe. This portion of the brain here. Now, this is taken from Gray's Anatomy from like 1911. And the blue portion of the brain, obviously it's not blue in reality, but just giving us the different regions of the brain. The frontal lobe is the blue section. Now, the frontal lobe has been called the citadel of the mind. It is the center of maybe spirituality, decision-making, morality. So these aspects are centered in the frontal lobe. Now, I don't want to be too simplistic and make it sound like that's the only part of the brain that has to do with these different activities in life. No, the brain is so much more complex than that. But clearly, researchers tell us that one of the centers of that fight to do the right or to do the wrong centers in the frontal lobe. They tell us that impairment of the frontal lobe has been called a hallmark of alcoholism and addiction. So if you have impairment of your frontal lobe, now it may be that you're going to a substance, drugs, alcohol, tobacco, these kind of things could actually cause the impairment, but it also potentially could be that something that has happened in your life to your brain could actually potentially make you more prone to addiction. But the good news is there's things that we can do in life that can actually enhance our frontal lobe function. The bad news is there's things in life that can actually inhibit and can actually be a literal detriment to our frontal lobe, this decision-making center, as I said, the citadel of the human mind. And let's look at some of the research on this. This is from Pharmacology, Biochemistry, and Behavior. The title of this review is Impulsivity, Frontal Lobes, and Risk for Addiction. And it's interesting, what it says here is that impulsivity is one of the hallmarks of people who are addicted to different things. They're impulsive. Something sounds good, so they want to do it. And so this is also one of the hallmarks of addiction is impulsivity. But let's look at what it says. Frontal lobe and addiction. The frontal lobe is the center of what researchers call executive function. Executive function is a part of the mental process that helps you control your behavior. Executive function is part of controlling impulses. It has to do with abstract thinking, planning, focusing your attention, and motivation. Obviously, when it comes to executive function, thinking about impulse control, controlling your impulses, this is one of the areas that obviously people who struggle with addiction, this is one of the areas that they have a serious battle with, and that is a struggle that, man, if I'm stressed, I want to do this. Or my mind wanders, oh, I want to do this. And so struggling with impulse control. Now that's a key component for someone who's struggling with addiction, but also focusing attention. Somebody who struggles with their frontal lobe is going to struggle to focus. We're going to come back to these two components, and we're going to talk about one activity that you can choose to do for simply 6 minutes, according to the research, that can seriously help you be able to focus and maybe lower levels of stress. Here's a study from Harvard research on alcohol and the brain. A study of 3,376 women and men revealed that even light drinking of alcohol Light drinking of alcohol was associated with shrinkage or atrophy of the brain. The shrinkage intensifies as more alcohol is consumed. In other words, more alcohol, less brain. Now, that's my wording, but that's what the research shows, that even, obviously if you drink a lot of alcohol, you have more shrinkage of the brain. Specifically, one of the areas of the brain that researchers have found shrinks in those people who consume alcohol, in any level that is something called the hippocampus. And the hippocampus, plural, is called hippocampi. And what they've discovered is that the hippocampi of people who drink alcohol, any level or any capacity, actually can shrink. Now, thinking about that, the hippocampus is part of the brain that has to do with your memory, various aspects of your memory. Part of the left portion may have to do with your linguistic memory. Part of the right side has to do with your spatial ability, memory of things like maps. And so this actually shrinks in people who are alcoholic, but not only alcoholic, someone who is just a casual drinker, just a light drinker, actually is likely to have atrophy, which is simply shrinkage of their brain. Now, this is the bad news. Is there any good news? Actually, yeah, or else I probably wouldn't do a video on it. But notice what we see. Here's some research on mechanisms of neurodegeneration and regeneration in alcoholism. 4 days of binging can cause degeneration of the brain and can cause cognitive or mental deficits. So fascinating that very rapidly the brain can deteriorate. And we go on to read, the good news is that there is regeneration, or what scientists call neurogenesis, which is growth of new cells, in the hippocampus, this memory portion of the brain, when the alcohol consumption ceases. Well, if you're a rodent anyway. And this may be true for humans. So we know, at least in alcoholic rats, right? I mean, think of the research, making these poor guys drink alcohol, and but sure enough, it causes similar damage to that what we see in human beings. But what they were able to discover, that actually this could be reversed by taking them away from the alcohol. Now with rats, obviously that's very easy, or rodents, it's very easy. You just take them away from the alcohol or take the alcohol away from them. With humans, it's a little bit harder because you have that great decision in your frontal lobe if you're actually going to quit. But if you do quit, your brain can actually potentially, according to the research, it may actually begin to heal. You may begin to have what is called neurogenesis, or new cells beginning to grow once again in your hippocampus. What good news this is. But one of the things that leads people to struggle with addiction is impulsivity. Another thing that causes them to struggle with it is stress. These two things come together, and someone's stressed and they impulsively want to do something to take away their stress. Is there something we can do? Now, you're going to want to see all the research. Not when you find out what it is, don't just stop. You want to find out how you can actually implement this. This is quite powerful, and also something you can do that could be a detriment to even doing this. So what is it? Here's some research asking the question, can reading lower stress levels? Research out of the University of Sussex looked at the effect of different activities on stress levels. 2 physical reactions to stress are increasing stress hormones and increasing heart rate. What this means is, so if you're in a stressful situation, you have certain hormones like cortisol that begin to surge through your body. And so then you feel that anxiety as something is brought to your mind, whether it's a physical stressor or whether it's a mental stressor. You may end up having this cortisol surge through your body, and you're stressed at that point. It's a physical stress response. But the other thing that happens of these two that we're looking at is you also have an increased heart rate. So these two things begin to take place in the body. So is there something that we can do to actually help this physiological stress response? Now, there's several things, but in this video we're only talking about one. But what is it? Can reading lower stress levels? What is it? The researchers had subjects increase their heart rates by certain exercises, or they gave them tests, which, by the way, is stressful. And then they tried different methods of relaxation. These included activities like going on a walk, listening to music, and also reading. And it turned out that the most powerful method of lowering stress levels was reading. Simply reading for as little as 6 minutes can lower stress levels by approximately 68%. 68%. What an incredible thought. 68% lowering of stress levels by simply reading. And evidently, one factor is that reading causes us to focus and concentrate, and this process may relax the heart muscles and other muscles in the body. And two things that addicts often struggle with, like we said, are stress and lack of focus concentration. Reading is one activity that may bring greater strength in both of these areas. One incredible thought, that a lack of focus and struggling with stress can make somebody more prone to turning to the bottle, turning to the cigarette, turning to meth. And right now, people all over the place are struggling more than ever just because of all that is going on in the world. And what are we seeing? We're seeing that one thing that you could actually do to help lower your stress levels in 6 minutes is simply reading a book. And one of the things to think about this is, though, we know that having some kind of device that's lit up in our face just before we go to bed can actually make us sleep more poorly, fall asleep slower, not get as rested sleep, and not have as good of the REM, the REM sleep that we need to feel rested, rejuvenated, and refreshed. So if you're going to do the reading, the best way to do it, especially if you're going to do it before bed, I'm not saying you always have to do it before bed, but if you do it before bed, it would be better to do it with an actual book rather than a computer screen or a phone or these kind of things. So it would be better to actually do it with a hard copy of a book. And this is quite powerful, that simply reading a book, and it makes me think about, we have actually been given a book that helps us lower stress levels, and that book is simply the Bible. I mean, the Bible even talks about it lowering stress. And it's interesting because even a part of the Bible that people think of as stressful, we're actually told that simply reading it will make you happier. In Revelation chapter 1, the Bible says right there in verse 3, blessed is he that readeth, or blessed is he that reads. Now that word blessed in both the Hebrew, which is the Old Testament, and the Greek of the New Testament, that word means in part to be happy or to make happy. So blessed, happy is the one who reads. That there's something about this, as you read this, that it actually makes you happy. Now that's fascinating in the context of the research that we're looking at, but in the context of this actual passage, it's saying blessed is the person who reads the book of Revelation. And you may know that the book of Revelation is a depiction of what takes place in the world when the world is filled with chaos and trouble and difficulty. And it talks about the peace that people can have, the happiness that people can have while plagues are going on, while death and destruction are taking place in the world, that you can actually have peace from reading this book. And not only from reading the book of Revelation. In this context, yes, it's the book of Revelation, but there's peace in both reading books, but also in reading what has been called the good book, or reading the Bible. It's changed my life. I would challenge you, if you find yourself in a stressful situation, find some time to read a good book, and what better book than spending some time in the Bible. Now, if you like this video, please hit the subscribe button. God bless and have a fantastic day.